Chapter 7. Mangloss's Aid. Gaggara was easy for someone of Reyes' strength to lift. Her hollow bones meant that she weighed only a little over half of what any human woman of roughly the same proportions would have weighed. No, Gaggara's weight wasn't the problem. It was her wings. Reyes squatted down by his girlfriend and tucked his arms gently under her. She hadn't been lying totally flat against the ground, and he was able to get his arms under her without having to move her unduly. Her wings, though, proved quite the problem. As Gaggara had lain there, her wings had become partially unfurled and appeared to be in a bit of a mess. Reyes felt a little uncertain about playing with his beloved's wings. He knew he had to get them folded under her so he could pick her up, but he was scared that he might disturb her or even bend one of her wings in the wrong direction. Reyes was very careful. He treated the wing nearest him as gently as he could, folding it into place behind her back, mimicking the way his own wings sat on his back when they weren't in use. Then Reyes tried to stand. This wing stayed in place beneath his hand. The other wing draped loose from Gaggara's back, and as he climbed to his feet, that wing dragged along the ground and threatened to get underfoot. "I could use some help," Reyes called to his two bodyguards. It was Hedgecough who answered first. She approached Reyes slowly, not having the benefit of magic to enhance her ability to see. "You should really let one of us carry her." "I appreciate the thought," Reyes replied, "but I'll carry her. I just need help with her wing." "Her wing?" Hedgecough replied uncertainly. "I can't even see her wing. I can barely see you." "Reyes," Mangloss spoke, "bring your girlfriend over here, would you? And be very careful. One of her wings seems to be dragging." "I know, thanks," Reyes replied. He decided not to wait for one of his bodyguards to tuck Gaggara's wing into place. Instead, he walked very slowly over to where Mangloss was waiting, placing one foot carefully in front of the other, ensuring, with each step, that Gaggara's wing hadn't slipped under his foot. "Okay," Mangloss said as Reyes eventually reached him. "Place her here, and be very gentle." The mage indicated an area right in front of himself, located at about waist height. Reyes could see nothing at waist height that he could rest Gaggara on, so he crouched down with the intent of resting Gaggara gently on the floor. No, Mangloss insisted. "Here! Place her here!" He indicated the same area as before. Reyes got back to his feet and looked at that area again. He could still see nothing except... Yes, there was a slight blue shimmer to the air at about waist height. Reyes smiled to himself. He should have known better than to second-guess the mage. He then set about placing the limp form of Gaggara on the shimmering blue glow. When he released her, she hung there in mid-air, apparently supported by nothing. "Will this help her?" Reyes asked. "It will," Mangloss replied. "It will make the journey to the castle a lot less bumpy for her. She will travel on a cushion of air. You won't have to carry her all the way to the castle. You won't have to fear that you might drop her, or trip over something in the dark that'll hurt her. And I won't be up half the night waiting for you to arrive." Mangloss didn't seem to make any kind of gesture, but slowly the blue shimmering nothing that held Gaggara began to head towards the gap between the two gnarly trees. It moved very slowly at first, but within a few seconds it was moving at walking pace. "Let's go," Mangloss instructed. Then he turned and followed his magical construct, walking at a slow yet determined pace. Reyes was only too eager to follow him, his eyes glued on Gaggara lying on the body of air before him. It didn't take long for Reyes to catch up with the mage. He glanced at the old man once before they stepped through the trees, but his concern was almost totally reserved for the love he felt for Gaggara. His two bodyguards, Hedgecough and Tanegi, followed on behind. It was probably hard for them, as the night was so dark they could probably see Reyes as little more than a dark shadow. The two bodyguards pretty much had to be following by sound as much as by sight. The air cart passed between the two trees. Reyes looked worriedly at Mangloss. He feared that the tingle of magic might in some way prove detrimental to the health of his love. Mangloss didn't seem to be even slightly concerned. Reyes and Mangloss stepped through the barrier at the same time. Once on the other side, the old mage turned to Reyes and instructed, "You need to keep following Gaggara to the castle. She should reach my room without incident, but if anything goes wrong, it would be best if you were on hand." "Okay," Reyes said doubtfully. "The thing's not going to drop her, is it?" No, Mangloss said in an almost patronising tone. "But it might get stuck somewhere, or simply grind to a halt." Reyes nodded. "I see. Where are you going?" "I'm going to push on ahead. When your fiancée reaches my hut, we're going to need a place to put her. I'm going to make some room, create a space where Gaggara can rest until she heals." "Can you not use teleport to get Gaggara there?" Reyes asked. Teleport can be quite a strain on the body, Mangloss replied, and there's a good chance you wouldn't survive it. No, it's better if you brought her on foot. As you say, Reyes replied. A moment later, the old mage was gone. A sudden, almost silent pop echoed from where the mage had been standing as air rushed in to fill the space he had so recently vacated. With Mangloss gone, Hedgecough made a suggestion. Maybe we should fly. Reyes looked round sharply at Hedgecough. No way was he going to leave Gaggara behind. Fly if you want to, but I plan to walk. It's too dark to fly, Tanegi voiced. It's too far to walk. Hedgecough protested. Walking didn't bother Reyes so much, not anymore. There had been a time when even the short distance from the magical pillars to the old ruined castle would have resulted in his feet feeling like they wanted to drop off with exhaustion. Since then, though, so much had happened, and he had done so much walking that such a short distance no longer seemed a big deal for him. Not so with Hedgecough and Tanegi. The two managed to keep pace, but it wasn't long before he could hear their moaning behind him about how much their feet were bothering them. Hedgecough seemed a lot more willing to voice her discomfort, while Tanegi did little more than breathe heavily from time to time. Gaggara continued to lead the way on her cloud of nothingness. Reyes admired her. Even unconscious, she was beautiful. Why would anyone want to poison you? Reyes was quite surprised to find he had actually asked the question out loud. It seemed to be an invite for all kinds of speculation from his two bodyguards. At least while they discussed the possibilities, they weren't complaining about their feet anymore. Hard to say. It was Hedgecough who spoke first. She continued to breathe heavily between sentences, the only real clue how tired she was. It might be that one of our huntresses has decided that she would do a better job as leader, and so has decided to remove what she sees as an obstacle to that position. That seems unlikely, Tanegi replied. She panted heavily. You don't think so, then? Hedgecough commented. Poison isn't the weapon of choice for a would-be leader, Tanegi answered. Poison is the weapon of a coward. A true huntress would have approached our leader and laid down a challenge in front of the entire village. Thus, there could be no doubt as to who the victor was once the challenge was over. With poison, the killer lurks in the shadows, and even if successful, they have no way to really state their claim afterwards. I see what you're saying, Hedgecough commented, but when our new chief declared that an attack against our leader is an attack against her, she turned our entire way of doing things on its head. For any huntress to make a claim for leadership, Gaggara has to be removed from the picture first. Hence using poison, Tanegi agreed. You could be right. The poison would have to be pretty sure of herself, Hedgecough declared. She might not be the only one to make a claim. After what felt to Reyes like half the night, the nothingness carrying Gaggara finally entered the courtyard of the old castle and began to make its way over to the illusory wall that marked the entrance to Mangloss's room. Reyes watched as Gaggara slowly glided through the wall, disappearing a bit at a time until she was gone from sight. Then he turned his attention to his two bodyguards. I'm going in alone. I want the two of you to wait out here, or you may return to the village if you prefer. But Hedgecough began to protest. Mangloss's room is too small to fit all of us, Reyes explained. Don't worry about me. I've known the man my entire life. I'll be quite safe in his company. Nevertheless, Hedgecough started. Not another word, Reyes insisted. Then he followed Gaggara through the illusory wall and into Mangloss's room. Mangloss had been busy. True to his word, he had been making room for Reyes' arrival. He had cleared all the junk off of the two tables and covered them with a blanket taken from his own bedding. The nothingness deposited Gaggara gently on the blanket, and then dissipated. Gaggara was lying on her back, her tail poking out between her legs, her wings slightly unfurled so that one of them was hanging off the edge of the twin tables. Gaggara's eyes were still closed, and she looked morbidly still and silent. Is she? Reyes asked worriedly. Mangloss didn't say a word. He approached Gaggara from the other side of the tables and placed a hand lightly on Gaggara's chest, with the palm of that hand raised so that only the tips of his fingers were in contact with her flesh. The other hand he lay on her stomach. Reyes waited patiently. It didn't look as if the mage was casting a spell. There didn't even seem to be the slightest blue glow from the mage's fingertips. Yet Reyes had no doubt that Mangloss was casting some kind of spell. She still lives, Mangloss said after a few minutes. She's very weak. It's still touch and go, but I think she'll survive. If anything, I'd say she's a little bit stronger than she was. Who knows? If she's still with us come morning, I might be willing to risk a regeneration spell. What about her baby? Reyes asked. Mangloss seemed uncertain. He moved his hand from her chest and pulled it down her body until both his hands were settled around Gaggara's stomach. An agonizing few seconds later, the maid said, The baby is still alive. She's very faint, but she does live. Thank you, Reyes said, breathing a sigh of relief. We're not out of the woods yet, Mangloss replied. In order to survive, the baby needs resources that the mother can't supply. If the baby's still alive come morning, then there might be a chance. I can do nothing for her directly. I can only try to heal the mother, and hope that some of the healing is passed on. Reyes nodded. He looked worriedly at his girlfriend. He gazed at her stomach and thought about the child she was carrying. He didn't want to lose Gaggara. He didn't want to lose his child. Anyway, even if I do cast Regenerate on her tomorrow, it will still be a week or more before she can get up and move around. She needs to rest and recover properly. She should stay here until I decide she's well enough to move, Mangloss explained. I don't suppose she'll like that, Reyes said. I'm sure, Mangloss said. But for the sake of her child, if not for herself, she must rest. If her child is going to survive, she needs the opportunity to do so. Reyes nodded his head slowly. Thank you. You're probably going to be seeing a lot of me in the next few days as I come to visit her. Yes, Mangloss said. About that. I'm staying, Reyes insisted. I may even set up a bed in here, against the wall or something, so I can stay with her. No, Mangloss said. By all means, watch over your fiancée. Make sure she recovers. It's just, Mangloss hesitated. It's just that, well, there is a small errand I was going to ask you to run for me. An errand? Reyes glanced at the sleeping form of Gaggara and then back up at Mangloss. Now? Well, no, not immediately, Mangloss said. By all means, wait until Gaggara has recovered enough so you can talk to her. Let her know why you aren't around when she recovers. I also think it best if you find the poisoner before you leave. If you aren't around to look after her, the poisoner might try again, and she could be more successful next time. Reyes nodded his head slowly. What do you want? I'm assuming you aren't just sending me to the well to fetch you a bucket of water. Presumably this is something no one else can do. Quite, Mangloss agreed. You are a harpy and can move around the occupied country pretty much unmolested, especially if you use the ring and pretend to be female. The ring is the important thing. Reyes looked concernedly at Gaggara. He didn't want to leave her at all. Maybe someone else could borrow the ring. You speak both Harpy and Elistran, Mangloss said. I suppose Jenny is quite fluent in Harpy, and her Elistran isn't too bad, so maybe she could go in your stead. I don't know what she'll think about going naked, and she'll have the disadvantage of not being able to fly when she uses the ring's abilities to disguise herself, but it might work. Reyes grinned. If he didn't know better, he'd suspect that the old mage was trying to manipulate him. Thinking about it, Jenny would be a good choice, except Reyes was a better one. Jenny was definitely capable of looking after herself, but no, she couldn't fly. The wings she would get from the ring would just be for show, as would the claws and talons. Jenny would look like a harpy, but she couldn't act like one. Besides, having just rescued his sister from one danger, Reyes didn't like the idea that he might be partly responsible for putting her back there. Very well, Reyes agreed. I'll go, but not before Gaggara is awake, and not before I've found the one who tried to kill her. Mangloss nodded. Good. Thank you. As long as we understand each other, Reyes commented. I'll help, but Gaggara comes first. Mangloss grinned and nodded. I understand. Reyes paused and then asked, So what is it you want? What I want lies in Goldspawn. Goldspawn, Reyes replied. Why there? Florif is under elven occupation. The entire country is like to be in flux as people try to survive day to day. They aren't likely to be thinking much in the way of art. Art? A month ago I might have sent you to First Town, but now First Town is almost empty. A month ago I would have been killed for setting foot in First Town, Reyes muttered. But he spoke clearly. So why am I going to Goldspawn? Goldspawn is currently our best opportunity. If you don't find what we need in Goldspawn, I might ask you to look further afield. But I'm sure they'll have what I need there, Mangloss explained. Yes, Reyes replied tiredly. But what do you want there? Oh, didn't I say, Mangloss asked? I need a canvas. A big one. A canvas. A big canvas, Reyes commented uncertainly. Mangloss nodded. The bigger the better. Spend all the gold you have left if necessary. I need to be able to fit 300 or so acres into the confines of what will still be a relatively small painting. The bigger the canvas you can find me, the easier and quicker it will be to cast a spell. Reyes nodded, realization finally hitting him. Yes, I see. Ideally I need it by the end of the week. You can probably get to Goldspawn and back within an afternoon. And I still have a few things to check before I actually need the canvas. So, I can give you the time you want to wait for your girlfriend to recover and to find her would-be killer too, Mangloss explained. The canvas will be of optimum importance soon though. Once everything else is ready, I'll need it before I can begin the spell. I must have it as a focal point for the energy of the spell. I understand, Reyes said. Good, Mangloss replied, seeming to take Reyes' comment as an agreement. He walked over to where his bedclothes lay scattered. I'm going to grab a quick couple of hours' sleep. Keep an eye on Gaggara. And if she stops breathing, wake me. If she should wake up, wake me. Otherwise I'll check on her again once I get up. Sleep well, Reyes told him. Then he rested his arms on the table beside his beloved girlfriend and watched her as if she was the only thing in his life that mattered.